Okay, welcome back to the Study Mastery channel. This is part 2 of the introduction. So just finishing off from that first part, a final thing that successful students do is that they create smaller goals within larger goals. And by having smaller goals that they can move towards and complete before finishing the larger goals, they can keep their motivation higher. Also, successful students have a good way of rewarding themselves for the effort that they've put in. So they acknowledge the effort they've put in and they find something enjoyable to do, some kind of event perhaps that allows them to uh, congratulate themselves or have their friends and family acknowledge the thing that they've done for the effort that they've put in. Okay, so now moving on to the principles of study mastery. Bearing in mind that education is perhaps the biggest investment people are making in their lives and will determine to a fair extent what kind of occupations are available to them later in life, it seems strange that students are expected to just pick up ways of learning effectively through their education without having it taught to them in a more clearly outlined fashion. So study mastery is a way of identifying the principles, the skills, the methods of learning that students can use whereby they're going to increase their learning efficiency, increase their outcomes, and maintain their motivation. So study mastery isn't about becoming a perfect student. It's about finding the elements of mastery that you already have, cultivating them and developing them in a structured way so that you can apply yourself to the full extent of your ability. Because it's fair to say that when it comes to education, your results are not just a reflection of what you know, they're also a reflection of how well you've been able to demonstrate that knowledge, how well you've been able to convince the markers that you do know the material that's being assessed. Okay, so study mastery is about finding all the smaller areas that are within the learning process and finding ways of improving each one in turn so that when you combine them all together, you create what can be called synergy. So you get a synergistic effect when you improve all the elements within that process. It's comparable to, say, with an engine. If you improve all the elements within the engine, you're going to improve the efficiency and output of that engine. Okay, so now looking at some of the areas that are common pitfalls for students. One of the main ones is fatigue. So students start off with a goal which they're aiming towards, but they find it difficult to maintain the momentum, maintain their level of engagement throughout the semester. So they might have peaks of enthusiasm followed by periods of low output, and then unfortunately, if that period of low output and energy is at the same time as their assessments and their exam, then they're going to get a poor result. So one of the things that Study Mastery aims to do is find ways of helping students to study sustainably so that they can keep up the momentum throughout the entire semester. Another very common one that lets students down is test anxiety. So the student may have covered the material, has a good knowledge of the material, but when it comes to actually applying it in a test setting, they're unable to do it without feeling anxious and overwhelmed. So they either misread the question or they answer it incorrectly, or they're unable to manage their time properly within that test scenario. So managing test anxiety is perhaps the most effective way of increasing the results that you actually get during your studies. And test anxiety is a very treatable difficulty to have. It's one of the easiest ones that you can treat. And so there'll be a whole video devoted to that. Third one is disorganization. So students are unable to manage their time effectively. They focus more on one subject than another, and the one that they have not focused on eventually suffers. So organization is about clearly delineating what there is to be done and the time that's available to do it, and making sure that that actually lines up properly so that you're not constantly struggling, constantly rushing to complete what needs to be done. Another element is distraction. So managing the distractions of life within the overall context of being a student, so that, let's say, family difficulties, relationship difficulties, work commitments, these can't necessarily be removed, but they can always be mitigated and mitigated better. So there would be a whole video devoted to how to manage the distractions that students face in a way that doesn't require them to cut themselves off completely like they've become a monk to deal with these things. Okay, so motivation, we've covered that a little bit earlier, but motivation is something that is based very much on the person's overall intentions in life and their overall sincerity that they have towards what they're doing. So you cannot really fake motivation without it eventually coming back to undermine you later on. Your motivation ought to be something that is meaningful enough for you that you're willing to commit yourself fully to it. And so if you're not motivated to commit yourself fully to what you're doing, then find something that you can commit yourself to doing that does motivate you. Because ultimately, study is stressful, it is demanding, it is a big demand on you personally. And if it's not something that really matters to you, then you've got to readjust that. Okay, stress management is another area that students have difficulty with. Unfortunately, when we become more stressed, we can often become unconscious of just how stressed we are. So we lose insight into what's actually affecting us. So we might think we're doing okay, we're managing well, but friends and family might notice that we're actually quite stressed. And it's at this point that we start developing blind spots in what we're doing. Our stress has the effect of almost anesthetizing us to what really is going on. So when our stress levels become too high, we are likely to make mistakes in what we're doing. Final one to cover is confidence. Students who are underconfident, that is, they're unaware of their true ability and their true potential, and therefore they sell themselves short and are unwilling to commit themselves to things that really do challenge them. That's one aspect that can be managed through either through counseling or through some self-insight techniques. The other is being overconfident as well. So feeling that you've got all the skills needed to get a really excellent result in what you're doing. You feel that you've got it all stowed away. But then when it comes down to it, you realize, actually, I'm just tracking to pass this subject rather than do really well. And so having a bit of that insight into how well you're actually doing, but also having a knowledge of what are your strengths and weaknesses and how to manage those and accept those. All right, so that's the final video for the introduction, and in the next videos we'll be covering specific areas of study. All right, thank you.